Warwick, thanks for your time. Welcome to CNBC.
No, great to be here.
So tell me, are you surprised by the speed of the recovery that we've seen across the aviation industry?
So I'm not surprised, although obviously the operational challenges have been almost imposed on us by the rapid cessation of flights. And then, of course, as the restrictions lifted, of course, the airlines really ramped up capacity even more than really we expected. If you go back to last summer, if you remember, we had sort of some Omicron variants coming out. And of course, there was a sort of stop-start approach where airlines were obviously putting on schedules and then, of course, not flying them. But of course, now with, in some jurisdictions, or many, COVID restrictions are completely lifted. And of course, there's effectively unpent-up demand. And I think one of the challenges is it's become much more peaky. So the sort of Fridays are even much higher than 2019, albeit that we're sort of about 90% of the ramp up versus 2019.
So how is Swissport ramping up services through the recovery? What type of operational activity are you seeing right now?
At Swissport, right, we have an expertise. We're a labour business, we're a people business, and we of course have been recruiting and of course training to get ready for the ramp up over the winter period. And this, albeit it's been reasonably well handled, there are jurisdictions where there's just a shortage of labour. People have not wanted to come back to work, and that's been the real challenges. So then we've seen labour rates rise, and of course there's pressure on all of us to get, of course, the prices to our customers up. So the whole system is under stress.
So the criticism is that the industry has been calling for the easing of COVID curbs and the removal of restrictions to get people moving again. You wanted this to happen, you knew it was coming, but you weren't prepared.
Well, I think the whole system is under pressure from security, immigration, and I think it all stems from this sort of rapid increase in capacity because the restrictions were lifted so quickly.
But you said it wasn't a surprise.
Well, it wasn't a surprise. It certainly wasn't a surprise that as soon as restrictions lifted, and we saw it back in the pandemic actually, on the summers, as soon as restrictions are lifted, then of course demand richly bounced back. So the demand is significant. So the question is, how do you then cope with the demand, especially when it's much more concentrated? So I think, for example, in a normal market where we've got about 10,000 people, we would recruit, let's say, 1,000 people between winter and summer. This time we're actually recruiting 3 times as many. And the real challenge is, it's not just the recruitment, but of course, it's actually getting people back to work. Of course, then to get people back to work, there's been a pressure on wages.
So we're seeing check-in queues, cancelled flights, baggage mishaps. Over the past 48 hours, there's been really incredible images emerging of this sea of baggage at Manchester Airport. That's just one example. IATA says, look, they're isolated incidents, but it really reflects the challenge at hand. So what can Swissport and other big outsourcers do to start addressing this?
So I think we have to work in partnership with the airlines and of course the airports, right, to make sure there's a systematic plan to deal with demand. Right? This sort of blame game culture is not helping anyone. Right? But the whole system, from the start with the governments, needs to make regulations that are flexible enough to ensure we have the right labour environment to recruit and of course train to manage the peaks. What you've seen effectively in the UK is this massive Brexit effect. Many of the Europeans are not in the UK anymore. Right? So we've now got a situation where we've got a huge demand, lack of staff, wages increasing, the process of getting IDs and even visas, you can't get a visa very quickly. So if you put all that into a pot, well, no wonder the UK is melting down. And the government has a lot to answer to make sure they really facilitate that growth.